Welcome to our show. You're listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections, a place to learn about and celebrate creative arts therapy. Each week we'll explore new ways that music, art, and dance can reach, connect with, and help individuals of all stages of health and wellness. Hi, I'm Bree Bynan, a board-certified music therapist and the managing partner for the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute. Tune in as I interview professionals from healthcare and educational backgrounds on the impact of the creative arts. If you prefer to watch our live video stream, simply visit www.pbmti.com. Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. I'm your host, Bree Bynan, a board-certified music therapist and certified neurologic music therapist with the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute. If you're joining us for the first time, just to give you an idea of what to expect from the next hour, each week we explore a different field, a different profession, a different way of caring and reaching the community, often based around the creative arts, and today is no exception. We're going to be focused on specifically the idea of mindfulness today, which I'm sure many of you have heard in some capacity. It seems to kind of be a new buzzword, particularly in the medical community, this idea of mindful meditation, what the benefits of it are, and why it's taking off, why it's becoming so popular, and how people feel it's benefiting them when it comes to all different diagnoses, all different stages of health and wellness, and illness as well. So I have two music therapist and a music therapy student as my guest today. Marlene Rodriguez-Wolf is the board-certified music therapist down in Miami at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center, and she's been doing some workshops, so she's going to teach us more about using music therapy to work towards this mindful meditation. And also, I have a student here who is completing his master's equivalency program at the University of Miami, and he just did a final project dealing with this world of music and mindfulness. So both are here to share their experience, what they have observed, the responses to be, how they set that up. This is something that is new to me, as you maybe can already tell as I'm explaining it. So I'm really excited to learn about it as well as we go through the conversation today. My experience is fairly limited when it comes to mindfulness meditation. I love the idea of it. I love the idea of being in the moment, being present in the moment. I am definitely one of those people who thought, I cannot meditate. I can't. If you tell me to close my eyes and not think about anything, I'm going to think about a million things. So I resisted it for a long time, the idea of it, and it took a friend from work to encourage me to go with her to a class, and it was very beneficial. I've started to include the practice on some levels in my own home, listening to tapes, things like that, and found it to be very helpful. Again, starting out as a skeptic, which I think many people do if it's a new idea to them. And as we talk to Marlene and John today, I'm sure they'll share that they've run into that as well. The idea of people not being really sure what to do during a meditation. Where is it going? How is it going to affect me? Will it affect me? And if it does, that's scary too. You know, how will it affect me? Where will I go in this moment? And there's a lot to consider. So if it is a new idea to you, please, I hope you will listen through the hour, not only as we learn about this idea, this practice of mindfulness, but how music can play a role as well. Obviously, Marlene and John are coming from the professional standpoint of either practicing as music therapists or learning to practice as a music therapist in a professional setting. But you don't need to be a music therapist or have any fancy degree to be able to use music to help increase your focus, your concentration, help you live in the moment, appreciate the moment. So we're going to share some tips for that as well that you can employ for yourself at home or for those that you might be caring for. Or if you're a professional, maybe you will have some tools that you can take with you into the profession as well, as you may be a caregiver in that role. So before we get started with our guests today, and they, again, are going to be speaking specifically about how they use music in this role, in this idea of mindfulness, this is just a definition that I found when I just did a basic search for mindfulness meditation. I'm looking forward to hearing these personalized definitions as we go through the hour today. And again, when it comes to actually being in that moment with clients, what they are observing the client going through. But this is the definition that I found. It says, mindfulness meditation is a Western, non-sectarian, research-based form of meditation derived from a 2,500-year-old Buddhist practice called Vipassana. Vipassana, thank you very much, or insight meditation. It is a form of meditation designed to develop the skill of paying attention to our inner and outer experiences with acceptance, patience, and compassion. I love that. With acceptance, patience, and compassion. The University of California Center for Mindfulness, part of the medical school's psychiatric department, defines mindfulness meditation this way. Mindfulness is a quality which human beings already have, but they have not usually been advised that they have it, that it is valuable, or that it can be cultivated. Mindfulness is the awareness that it is not thinking, but which is aware of thinking, as well as aware of each of the other ways we experience the sensory world: seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and feeling through the body. Mindfulness is a non-judgmental, open-hearted, friendly, and inviting of whatever arises in awareness. It is cultivated by paying attention on purpose, deeply, and without judgment to whatever arises in the present moment, either inside or outside of us. By intentionally practicing mindfulness, deliberately paying more careful moment-to-moment attention, individuals can live more fully and less on the automatic pilot, thus being more present for their own lives. Well, just hearing that, one definition, one way that this center it describes the experience, it makes sense why this would be such a popular idea. In our world of many worries, many things going on at the same time, not only with our own health, but with all those in our lives that we're caring for, that we're interacting with, how precious that moment can be to take a second for ourselves, to focus inward, and to slow down time a little bit. Again, personally, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but one thing that I do with my clients, particularly with my Parkinson's group, is spend a lot of time focusing on breath work for a multitude of reasons. One, specifically, the group is working on speech goals for Parkinson's patients. So when we are paying special attention to our breath and to where our breath is coming from, particularly from our diaphragm, it really brings attention to taking that deep breath, watching your posture, making sure you're sitting up nice and tall, shoulders back, so that you're able to have your eye contact engaged, reaching out to those around you, supported by your breath, so that the deeper your breath you take, ideally, the louder the volume of your voice. And we found that to be very true for many individuals in our class. As you may know, Parkinson's does not affect two people the same. It's a very individualized disorder, which is why it's difficult at times to really pinpoint exercises to work on things. But breath work is a great foundation. So we always start with that, making sure that our bodies are set up in a way set up for success, setting up our instrument for success, which is our voices in that group, with the even pressure on both sides of our legs to have our feet grounded, sitting up tall, and just paying attention to that deep breath. Again, to help with the volume of the voice, to encourage people to have their heads back so that they can see who's around them, see who wants to interact with them, maybe have a conversation or share a musical moment with them, but also refocusing that moment on the breath. I'd appreciate every week that these individuals come with their caregivers, with their family members, with their professional hired caregivers to this group. Make the effort for them to be here when I know it's not easy. And I know there's a lot going on, whether they didn't sleep the night before, or they're having issues balancing medication. There's a lot to consider. with these individuals. And the fact that they're there, I appreciate so much and want to respect their time as much as possible. And the best way we can do that is really focusing them on why they came today, why they made that commitment for themselves. And focusing on breath is such a great way to do that. We learn these things in school, we hear it said, we can look up things on Google or research, but what's the best feedback to get is when a client says to you, which I had this wonderful opportunity last week, I couldn't sleep at all last night. My mind was wandering, I was worried about everything, I was having issues with my medication, and I just remembered your breathing exercises. And I breathed in for the count of 4, I held my air, and then I released for 4. And then I breathed in for the count of 4, I held my air, and I released for 8. And I did that until I fell asleep, and I slept through the night. That's amazing. That's everything. I mean, we can talk till we're blue in the face about how fabulous we feel in the moment with these sessions, these responses that we're getting from individuals, smiling, making music, having fun, being able to escape temporarily from maybe some pain, some agitation they're in. But to hear the impact of that outside of the session, at home, in a real life situation, is so valuable. And I'm really glad I had that experience to hear that from her, to hear that feedback, because I think it lends itself well into the conversation that we are going to have today on mindfulness meditation. Again, if this is something new and you're like me and how I felt about that's not something I can do, my mind is too busy, I can't relax my mind, please make that investment for yourself. Give yourself this time, the next 45 minutes, to learn more about this and hopefully learn some tools that you can employ in your life and those that you love as well. So when we come back from this break, we're going to be talking to Marlene Rodriguez-Wolf. So just stick around after a few words from our sponsors.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer. Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com. Engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show. Hello, thank you again for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. Tonight we're talking about mindfulness and music. So if you have heard this, what I consider kind of a buzzword in the medical community, I see a lot of programs getting started, getting funding. A lot of my patients that I see are also going to these programs for mindfulness meditation. And I myself don't know a whole lot about it. I love learning little bits and pieces, but I'm really excited to introduce our next few guests that are really going to be able to not only open our eyes to what that concept means, what that practice means, but how music plays a role in that as well. So we have Marlene Rodriguez-Wolf from Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center down in Miami on the phone. Are you there, Marlene?
Hi, Bree. Thanks for having me.
Hi. Thank you so much for calling in, and you got baby to sleep, so you were able to join us.
I'm a successful mother and professional.
Nice job. You're nailing it. Good job. And John, who is a equivalency master's program student from UM, is also here. John, thank you again for being here.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So, Marlene, I'm going to start with you. If you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about your background and how you came into this field.
Well, my background, let's see, I started in music therapy as an undergrad. So I did my undergrad in music therapy at Berklee College of Music in Boston. And after I graduated from there, I worked for a few years around the area. I worked at Shriners, which is a burns hospital in Boston. And then I developed a series of early education programs for a company called Little Sprouts, which is early education centers all around Massachusetts. And then after a few years of working, I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I looked into some master's programs, and the University of Miami stuck out because they not only have a great music therapy program based on neurologic music therapy, which I was very interested in, but it was also in Miami, which I was eager to leave the Boston snow and come into the nice weather. Mm-hmm. So I went to the University of Miami and completed my master's there. And after that, I started immediately right away. I created the program at the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center for music therapy, and it was the first that they had ever had. So I was very excited to be able to bring this new approach to what Cancer Support Services is now at Sylvester, which is an interdisciplinary approach to treatments. Basically, we incorporate integrative mind-body wellness practices into cancer care. So we have massage therapy, acupuncture, music, exercise physiology, and a variety of different services that are meant to provide the patients with a holistic approach to treatment.
That's wonderful. And did a lot of those programs start getting their footing as music therapy was coming into it, or had they already been established?
A few have been starting. Basically, we had an integrative medicine doctor who was Dr. Ashwin Mehta, and he, along with the other leadership, had the idea of bringing this integrative medicine practice into the institution. So they started, I think, first with exercise, then with nutrition, then with massage, then exercise, and little by little they kept adding all the components. Arts and medicine had already been there for many years. So I think the last piece of it was music therapy, and once I was at it, it was now the complete bubble was formed.
It all starts with an advocate, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. How did you get interested in the practice of mindfulness?
Well, actually, at UM, at the University of Miami, I had discussed a little bit of the practice with my advisor, Dr. Teresa Lesiak, who is one of the main music therapy researchers in mindfulness specifically. And she and I had always kind of discussed it in passing, just like, what are you reading nowadays? How are you incorporating it into your practice? And those kinds of very informal things. But it wasn't until I got to Sylvester that I realized the huge need that cancer patients, and honestly everybody, really has for managing the daily stresses that we face in our lives. So I kind of didn't get into mindfulness per se, but just kind of meditating in general. So I started looking into different meditation practices and just ways to manage stress and anxiety within our day-to-day lives. And as you said in your previous statement, that mindfulness is just kind of the buzzword that we're hearing nowadays. Everybody's talking mindfulness, and there's a training here and a book there. And it just kind of, if you're into managing stress and anxiety, you're going to be exposed to mindfulness in however form it takes,
Absolutely. So speaking specifically in that, like you said, it being the buzzword right now, and that everyone is kind of becoming more aware of and maybe reading into, what are the 7 attitudes of mindfulness? What does that mean?
So the 7 attitudes of mindfulness are different attitudes that the person who is wanting to be more mindful or wanting to engage in this kind of mentality change should be engaging in or should be aware of practicing. So mindfulness kind of incorporates these different attitude changes as a way of saying it's not something that you accomplish, like I'm going to read the book and all of a sudden I'm a mindful meditator. It's more about a lifestyle change and incorporating these things into your day-to-day. So the 7 attitudes, if we can just list them off the top of our heads, it's like non-judgment, patience, having a beginner's mind, which means letting go of our preconceived notions of things and just seeing everything as if it's a new experience, trust, non-striving, which is basically trying to get you to realize that we're so goal-oriented and all of our lives are a series of tasks and lists that we need to do, and that within itself can create a lot of stress and anxiety. So the attitude of non-striving is trying to make you realize that it's okay to just be, and it's okay to just be still for a moment or even for an extended period of time. Accepting acceptance, basically seeing things as they actually are in the present and not trying to change the good or the bad and just kind of accepting what the reality is. And then finally, letting go, which is a way of just, letting things be and accepting things as they are. So oftentimes we'll find that we worry too much about either the past or the future. So we're either living in the situations that we've lived in the day, or we're worrying about the things that we need to do tomorrow. And that can create a tremendous sense of stress and anxiety, because you're never just experiencing the moment as it's occurring. So mindfulness really is attempting to get you to be more aware of the present and just be in the present moment.
So a lot of the things that you're saying in those attitudes, specifically being okay with being still. So we as music therapists, we struggle with that, right? Where we aren't always okay with being still. We like to stay busy. We like to affect as much change as possible in the time we are allotted. How do you find that teaching this and learning more about it has affected your work as a music therapist?
Well, in teaching it, and I think John will say this when he comes on and speaks a little bit, there is no way to share this with people and not practice it yourself. Like, if you're practicing, you're sharing it because you're kind of embodying the practices in your own life. It's not, there's such a thing as a formal practice versus informal practices. So formal practices is when you sit down, you carve out the time, you're meditating. But then mindfulness is also attempting to get you to incorporate informal practices throughout the day, where you have little tidbits of awareness in activities that you may take for granted. So maybe washing the dishes, or driving, or even bathing, sometimes eating, which is a little bit about what you were referring earlier about how the senses are at the forefront of mindfulness. And it's all just about incorporating that into yourself, and then therefore sharing that with other people as you're teaching it. So as a music therapist, it's difficult because we especially have a problem with silence. We like to fill those silences with music and with meaningful conversations. But you'll find that it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the reality of what it is, and accepting that reality, if that kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all that being said, and obviously that would be something we would need to practice, is appreciating that silence, appreciating those moments. How do you find that music is best applied to practice some of these attitudes?
Well, music can be applied in basically any way that elicits the behavior you're trying to accomplish. Just like us music therapists know, the music needs to be the catalyst that drives the behavior or drives whatever the goal we're trying to accomplish is. So if we take an example of, let's say, patience. So the attitude of patience means, letting things unfold in their own time. So there's nothing more perfect than to practice letting things unfold in their own time than to listen to a piece of music, because, as we know, music is a stimulus that occurs over time. So by tracking the progress of the music over time, you are therefore exercising that attitude of patience by just letting the music happen as it's happening naturally. Especially if you're listening to a recording of music, you're going to have very little influence on how it plays out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So listening to a piece of music mindfully is actually the perfect way of practicing that patience attitudinal foundation of mindfulness, especially if the music is unfamiliar to you. Because if the piece is familiar, you know what to expect. You know when Let It Be is going to go into that chorus, and you know kind of what you're expecting. So it's very easy to be practicing patience in that sense when you know what's coming. The challenging part comes when you have to be patient of the unknown, which is usually what happens to us in everyday life. So we're stuck in traffic. We don't know when we're going to get out of traffic. We have a prediction, but we really don't know. So we have to practice that patience over and over again. So listening to music that is unfamiliar is a perfect way to do that, because you really don't know what to expect. So if you kind of see the mirrors of activities that are based on music and activities that are meant to translate into everyday functioning, I think it makes it a little bit clearer.
That makes so much sense. And I never thought of it that way, because I am a person who will flip to the end of the book if I'm not sure where it's going. Wow. But yet I would never do that with music, because it's just, you don't know what you're missing. There's so much beauty along the way, and obviously, so many of us musicians, our favorite way to take in music is to go to a live performance, and you have no control in that situation, yet it brings so much joy, and you are forced to just appreciate the moment. Wow.
And then you're also practicing another foundation, which is the beginner's mind. When you go to a concert, like what you're saying, there is really no preconceived notion. Like, yes, you can know the song if it's a known band, but if it's, say, you go to a live jazz band on Friday, everything is improvised, and no two performances are the same. So it's a perfect way for you to practice the beginner's mind attitude, because everything is absolutely brand new. So you're forced to live in the moment, which is what mindfulness is trying to have us achieve. So there's another example of how music is just a perfect stimulus to be practicing these kinds of attitudes.
It makes so much sense. Yep, that's perfect. Thank you for explaining it that way. What resources are available for beginners or anyone who might be listening or watching tonight that would be interested in exploring this and maybe bringing it either into their practice if they're a music therapist, or just learning more about it, whether they're a professional or personal caregiver?
Well, I think that the only way to really learn something, especially this kind of mindfulness, which is more of a practice, the only way to really learn it is to actually do it yourself. So starting out with the basics of what people are utilizing. A lot of people are utilizing the mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques, which Jon Kabat-Zinn developed, I think, in the early 80s at UMass, which is the University of Massachusetts. He published, the first book that he published was called Full Catastrophe Living, and people usually use that as a starting point. Like, I'm going to hear what he has to say, and then kind of from there, the path kind of becomes clear, because people start suggesting other books and things like that. But usually Full Catastrophe Living is his most well-known publication, and it's kind of a good introduction to it. If you're a practitioner and you're looking for something concrete that you can give your patient tomorrow, you should look into buying the actual protocol, the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Workbook, which is available on Amazon. And it's I think it's an 8-week protocol which gives you step-by-step directions and different exercises that you can do to achieve these mindfulness practices. So it'll give you a little bit of information, and then it'll give you an exercise to do, and you fill out the workbook as you go along.
Great. Can I just have you repeat the titles of both of those books one more time?
So it's Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn, and the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Workbook. It's available on Amazon. It's a blue book with a flower in front of it.
Very nice. So perfect. I just want to ask you one more question. I have seen from you sharing some workshops that you've done at Sylvester, right, with music therapy and mindfulness, and I just wondered if you could kind of help paint the picture for us of what that looks like, how you structure a program like that.
Well, the program that you've seen me sharing is not just a music-specific workshop series. It's actually a whole mind-body wellness program that was created at Sylvester, I think, 2 years ago. And so we offer free workshops that are basically tailored to address the mind-body connection and wellness in general, not just for cancer patients, but for anybody who's interested in the community. So the Terry and Wayne Lobdell Mind-Body Wellness Series, it's a long name, I know, but it's a series of free workshops that anybody can attend. And we have, like you said, we have music workshops. We actually have mindfulness meditation ones without music and with music. We have nutrition workshops. We have an acupuncture one. The acupuncture one is actually tomorrow if anybody's interested in attending. And all of those workshops are just meant to increase your wellness, because we know that wellness is just not one practice, but all of these different things. So mindfulness is just one component of the wellness series. So if anybody's interested in attending one of these workshops, all they have to do is show up. I can post the calendar if you'd like. I can email it to you so you can distribute it to people, because
Absolutely.
I think it's important to practice these things in person and with somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look back at meditation practices like Buddhism and things like that, like there's a teacher and there's the student, and we always hear the metaphor of the teacher has all the wisdom and the student is just an open vessel receiving everything. But the reality is that as you teach, you learn, and as you learn, you also teach. You know what I mean? So connecting with other people that are practicing these things is extremely important for your own growth.
That's perfect. And we'll definitely, please do send that to me. We'll blast that out on our social. If you're not already, please do follow us on Twitter, PBMTI, or on Facebook, Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute, where we will repost some of these resources that we're talking about tonight. I know I said that was my last question, but I lied. When you were talking, you were mentioning music and mindfulness without music, but that's not the same as music therapy and mindfulness, correct?
Yeah, so basically we know that just the use of music within itself doesn't imply music therapy. And there's a definition of music therapy, but there's also many uses of music that don't necessarily have to imply that there's a therapeutic treatment plan or that there's a music therapist present. So there's a lot of people utilizing music for mindfulness. That doesn't necessarily mean it's music therapy. However, me as a music therapist and John as a music therapy student, we are interested in seeing how music therapy can play a role in these things. But I think you'll find that there's a combination of both. You know, some things are music listening, some things are live music making with a music therapist that can really manipulate the musical elements based on what the client needs. But no, I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. It's just kind of what the client needs at that moment.
Sure. So you're saying the difference being, obviously, the music therapist is present to be able to manipulate the music in a live setting, but also, I would imagine, when people open up and let themselves really get into this, that there's some processing that would go on.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because if we're asking people, for example, in the medical setting, we're asking people to become more aware of the present and of who they are, a lot of things can come up. Like within our sessions, and John can share a little bit more about this as well, patients may have realizations of the way that they interact in their relationships, or the way that they share information, or the way that they react to conflict. And there's always a therapeutic component in the music therapy session where we're helping clients identify what it is, the issue that they're trying to achieve, that mindfulness may have clarified. So that's why John Kabat-Zinn sometimes says that mindfulness or mindfulness-based stress reduction may not be the most appropriate thing for clients that are going through an active process of either they have a treatment plan for psychology or psychiatry in place, because some people do need a little bit more than just awareness. Like, you take the awareness, and then the music therapist can then really translate that into a therapeutic plan for wellness and change. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It sounds like a beautiful marriage of the two. And we've really set you up, John, here with all the things we're going to talk about after a quick break. Marlene, do you want to stick around and chat with us? If you need to go, that's all right, too.
I will.
Yeah, what's that? You need to head out. Okay, well, thank you.
I will be sticking around.
You're going to stick around? Okay, wonderful. We'll just be back after a few words from our sponsors. Thank you.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer, Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com. Engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show. Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. I'm your host, Bree Bynan, and we're talking about mindfulness tonight. Specifically, how the idea of practicing mindfulness can be enhanced or impacted by using music, and also how it can be used within the scope of music therapy. So we've been talking to board-certified music therapist Marlene Rodriguez-Wolf, who works in Miami at the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. And I'm also very excited to introduce John Britton, a master's equivalency level student at the University of Miami, who's now finished his coursework, right?
Just about.
Just about, and on to internship. So congratulations to you, John. And thanks so
Thank you.
much for taking the time to be here. I know this must be a busy time of the year for you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really
Absolutely.
excited.
Good. And it's perfect because sounds like you've just kind of wrapped up this project and exactly
Yes,
what
I
we're
just
talking
did
about.
a clinical version of a thesis, so a master's clinical project in music therapy. I just finished all my hours and finishing up the paper right now for it. So I've been working on that the past year and a half.
Oh my gosh. Again, congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you.
How exciting. So before earlier in the show in my intro, I just, like I said, at random kind of picked a definition for mindfulness, but I'd love to hear your take on this, how you would define mindfulness, especially being so enmeshed in this world for the last year and a half, like you said.
Sure, and I think you provided a beautiful definition. I want to go to Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition, again, who helped create this mindfulness-based stress reduction program, and he defines mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So we have this purposeful, conscious attention, so it can't happen on accident, unfortunately. It takes some effort. It's in the present moment. And as we know, the present moment is constantly shifting. So the more in tune we are to the present moment, the more we are in tune with those constant changes going on in that moment. And then finally, non-judgmentally. And Marlene was talking about the attitude of acceptance and those other mindful attitudes that Kabat-Zinn brings up in MBSR. So for me, I think that's a wonderful definition, and when you hear that, I feel like it's not quite as clear as what are you actually doing in a meditation practice. And as Marlene mentioned, there is an informal and formal. So during a formal practice, you're sitting there, okay, I'm having this accepting attention to the present moment, but what am I paying attention to, essentially? Which, it can be anything. One of the most common objects of attention for meditation is sensations of the breath. It might be your abdomen as it rises and falls with the breath, or it might be a feeling of the breath in the nostrils as you inhale and exhale. Mm-hmm. And so what your attention actually is to the bare sensation of that. So it's the feeling in the body. Rather than thinking about the experience, saying, oh, this is nice, that would be a judgment. So that's an extra thought. But rather, we want the bare sensation. Now, in Buddhism, thoughts are actually another sense. So that's just another thing to observe as it arises and passes away, just like hearing a sound or noticing the feeling of the breath.
Wow. So and all these things you're not supposed to be... See, again, I go back to my... okay, all these things I'm not supposed to be paying attention to, It's a lot. So it's not something that you can just, like Marlene was saying, read a book and, okay, great, now I know everything about mindfulness. It takes experiencing it.
It does.
Is that a process that you went through as well, experiencing it firsthand?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I've had my own personal meditation practice for the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
It really started with Tai Chi, which is a form of meditative movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I was also doing a sitting meditation at the time in high school, and it's evolved ever since, and I've really stepped up my practice these last couple of years in what I do. And I find that meditation, to be successful, the thing that holds most people back from starting is this idea of, I have a monkey mind, or I have too many thoughts, like you mentioned when you were starting. And we'll talk more about why I think music is amazing for that. But the first barrier to entry, as far as thoughts all over the place, really deal with concentration. So I find that this idea of building up a firm and strong concentration is very important at the beginning of mindfulness practice. And I would say that's probably most of what I've been doing these last 10 years, just trying to stay with the breath. When I notice a thought come, I notice it, take a deep breath to relax, say it's okay, come back to the sensations of the breath. Sometimes I'll do that with what's called a body scan, which is directing attention to different parts of the body, so starting with the feet, moving systematically through the body until you get to the head. So you can really have any of the five senses be what you're watching. It's more watching that bare sensation. So my practice has evolved since then, and you mentioned a word earlier, Vipassana, which is really looking, not just trying to concentrate and stay with the sensation, but now we're looking at what's the quality, what's the nature of that sensation. So it might be noticing how sensations are constantly changing over time. Because as you're able to stay with the breath, you start to notice that it isn't only one fluid sensation. There are actually hundreds or even thousands of sensations occurring every second as the breath passes, and we might only pick up on one of those, or maybe one every other second. So as we practice mindfulness, that's one way that our attention deepens, is first we can concentrate more with the object. We have less and less thoughts coming in, which is really nice when you have less and less thoughts to really stay focused. And then also start looking at the nature of those sensations and seeing how they're constantly passing through time, or seeing how looking at them more objectively. So noticing that this sensation does not define who I am, which would be another way of looking at it.
So all that being said, and I think you can answer this question obviously personally, since this is something you've been so engaged and involved with for 10 years and really committed yourself to, it sounds like, but also now in your practice as you finish up school, what are the benefits that you're observing?
Well, I'll start with me personally. I find that I'm less reactive, and that's what I found when I started practicing. What I like is I might have a temper, might have a little anger issues at times. I'm married now. Anyone in a relationship knows things can be challenging. But I find mindfulness practice helps me be really grounded. There's also great research on there, one for the typical adults, showing great stress reduction benefits. But then also in research with different populations. And then what we'll talk about is some wonderful research of MBSR with cancer population, and that's a program specifically designed for cancer patients called Mindfulness-Based Cancer Recovery, and which is awesome. Okay, what was my thought? Let's see here.
For benefits.
Oh, right. Okay. And so we have, for one, some amazing mental health benefits. So reduction in depression and anxiety and improvement in mood. Such as improving fatigue. Also improvements in attention. So a lot of cancer patients have chemo brain as they're going through chemotherapy, and being able to remember things and pay attention is very important. But also a lot of physical benefits as far as pain management. So not just with the cancer population, but other populations that have chronic pain, being able to have a perceived sense of less pain because there's less of an emotional response to it, and being more okay with the pain being there. Being in that present moment, and then as well as improving sleep and improving tension in the body, relaxation, things like that.
I mean, and those are all the major key areas. You know, it sounds like it's touching upon all of those. So if you wouldn't mind just to jump a little bit to your thesis, your clinical thesis that you did, how did you structure that? How did you set that up? How did you administer the practice with your music therapy? What did that look like?
Sure. I'll give a quick background information. I really drew a lot upon MBSR, Kabat-Zinn's MBSR, which has these core practices of mindfulness of breathing, the body scan, a walking meditation, and also hatha yoga, a slow form of yoga. So I made sure to include each of those elements, including a mindfulness of breathing, including a body scan, and including something more active related to the hatha yoga or walking meditation. So I wanted to use each of those elements. Now, my advisor, Dr. Lesiak at University of Miami, did a wonderful pilot study 2 years ago with women with breast cancer who were undergoing treatment, and she used a 4-week mindfulness-based music therapy program, really based around those 7 attitudinal foundations that Marlon was speaking of. And so she kind of paved the way, saying, look, music really can be used with mindfulness effectively. And my question is, well, what does a full intervention look like? And so I structured a 4-session intervention to be able to actually see cancer patients while they are receiving treatment. And so I would visit them in the outpatient center at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center while they're receiving chemotherapy, and also the inpatient units, so patients who are staying overnight. And my first session was really focused on mindful music listening. So this idea of mindful music listening isn't original to me. It's in the research, and people are using it clinically within music therapy and also other related mental health professions. And it's wonderful. There's some great research out there showing mindful music listening actually encourages greater relaxation than just typical music listening, also there's greater sensitivity to the music and also greater enjoyment. So that actually makes sense on a certain level. If you're listening to music very deeply, very focused, you can imagine that whatever reactions you will have to it are going to be magnified because you're tuned into the music very purposefully that much more. So I love that because if it's music that someone already loves, they're going to get that wonderful, joyous reaction that much more. And so starting a session with mindful music listening is very approachable. And it's something that I wanted to mention here because there's so many people who say, I can't sit down and meditate, my mind wanders too much. Well, listening to a piece of music is something that we do all the time, and your mind will most likely not wander as much while a piece of music is going on.
Yeah.
There's much more for your mind to grasp hold of, and that's okay. You have a more holistic point of view, and so in this case, it's really assisting and supporting your attention. So there's these qualities of the music that are drawing your attention in, especially if it's something that you're familiar with and that you enjoy. So I'd make use of that, giving mindful music listening instructions to cancer patients and then doing that with them for a song. Then we would talk about acceptance and move into an unfamiliar song. So thinking about qualities of music and the amount of acceptance we might need if a song is unfamiliar, Marlene was talking about how patience with an unfamiliar song, we need more of it. So we can still listen to a pleasant song, which might require more acceptance, more patience, but if it's still pleasant, it's still music, our attention still will wander less, most likely. And so it gives us that crutch, that wonderful support, so that we can pay attention in the moment and feel good about our practice.
Is that something you provide live?
That is something that I would, in the Cancer Center, I provided recorded music for a couple of reasons. One, if it was familiar music, if it was a song that they really loved, I wanted it to be an exact replication because I didn't want them to be distracted by the elements that I introduced that were
makes
novel. So that might lead toward thinking about the experience rather than experiencing the sensation of the sound itself. But as far as using music live as an introductory practice to that first session, I would do a tone chime exercise, which we might have time for later on the show, but we'll see. And essentially using tone chimes, which have a long resonance and they slowly fade, to listen as they slowly fade into silence. And so that sound and the silence have a really nice introduction to learning to listen to the passing moment to really start off the session on a strong note.
That's wonderful. And I know we're like right in the middle of the intervention. I hate to break at this point, but I do want to have enough time to talk about that and to get a little tiny bit of experience of that, of the tone chime, just to let those who are watching and listening really be able to experience that. So we're going to cut to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to finish learning more about this project with John and hopefully get to have a little fun as well. Thanks.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer, Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com, engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. I'm your host, Bree Bynan, and we're just finishing up our conversation tonight with a music therapy student, John Britton, here locally in Miami at the University of Miami. He's talking to us about his final project in school, which was based around mindfulness music therapy, and he was just describing the first two steps in the program that was in the first session, right, with that mindfulness music listening, with listening, appreciating familiar music and unfamiliar music. music. And then what comes after that?
That's right. I just want to summarize briefly here how I use music in the rest of the sessions. So mindful music listening, really, music is what we're paying attention to in the meditation. So when we're meditating to the breath is what you're paying attention to. But in this case, it's the music. So music can also help bring about another experience in a very unique way. A lot of us listen to music to regulate our mood. It brings about these feelings that we really want to have. And so positive, uplifting feelings. So if we choose music that's very familiar to us and that reliably produces some sort of a positive emotion, such as appreciation or joy or happiness, then we can use music to specifically bring up that emotion, but then pay attention to the emotion itself. So that's what we're meditating to, which is very similar to a loving kindness meditation, which is another traditional Buddhist meditation that's often used. And it's used because it helps to cultivate that attitude of acceptance and helps us to have a kinder attitude towards ourselves, towards the good and the bad. And so that would be music facilitating this other object. And then lastly, music can act as a support. A lot of times when you turn on YouTube channel, a guided meditation, all of a sudden you might hear harp or flute music, something pretty in the background, which I think is great. That's helping to lower the arousal level and help to facilitate that meditation. I think music can be even more purposeful as a support in that way, or as the background to a meditation, in that using music specifically to act as instructions. So for instance, say we're meditating to the breath, and we might want the music to somehow reflect the slow rise and fall in the breath. That way, if we use a guided meditation over and over, in the future, we might take away those verbal instructions, and the music itself, we hear that little melody, it cues us right back in. I'm meditating to the breath, and then we get cued back into that mindful state and meditating to the breath. And so in that way, music can act as an additional way to help pay attention and instruct what to do.
It makes so much sense. I mean, there are remaining just about 2 minutes left today. We've pulled out, if you are listening and you can't see this, we've got, what is this instrument here?
These are tone chimes. So, yeah, the beautiful instrument. Why don't we play them so that everyone can hear what they sound like?
Okay, together or one at a
yes,
time?
sure. Just so that, just to try it out.
Well, you can tell I played in the choir, right? The tone
That's
chime
right.
choir. Got to dampen and
Yeah,
everything.
you dampen.
Yep,
Yep. You hear it has a very long sound. Now, this exercise I got from Dr. Lesiak, who used this on her mindfulness-based music therapy intervention, where she would play a tone chime at the start of a session and just listening to the slow decay of that tone chime. In my sessions, I like to do this with the client, alternating. So essentially, I would play first. We'll listen to the sound of the tone chime as it completely fades into silence. And then, Bree, you'll play next.
Okay.
And we'll listen to it completely fade.
Okay.
And we'll each play 2 times total.
Okay.
So 1, 1, 1, 1.
Okay.
And all we're doing is listening to the sound itself. Okay?
Okay,
And anyone listening in can follow along with us.
perfect.
So even in those 60 seconds, you can tell the patience required. That was only 60 seconds. Imagine doing that for 15 minutes, staying with one sensation. And I love my favorite space is that space right between where the sound and silence, you're not sure where the difference is, which is sometimes the most difficult part to stay with. And you just want to move forward so you really see where that patience
You
comes
wonder,
in.
am I creating this sound? Is it really happening? Or am I? Yeah, that was very, like you said, in just 60 seconds, very relaxing to be a part of.
Right.
And to be aware of that to have to really listen outside yourself and pay attention to what someone else is doing as well.
True.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So it's so a great way to start, and really you can do that with any instrument. You can do that with any sound. If you want, you can do what Graham calls a sound walk, which is take a walk through your neighborhood or house and just noticing all the different sounds as they pass by.
And this is the perfect time of year for that. Spring with the new bird sounds and that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I love it. Thank you so much, John, for taking the time to come up here from Miami and to share your project with us. Marlene, I don't know if you're still there, but thank you wherever you are for calling in.
Thank you.
Oh,
Bree.
you're so patient. You're still there. Thank you so much,
I'm gonna
Marlene.
go
I
do
really
my sound
appreciate
walk.
it. You know I've been bugging you to come on for months now, so I appreciate it so much. Thank you, guys. You're doing great work. Keep it up.
Could I do one quick plug?
Absolutely.
With Marlene, a few friends of mine, we recently started a Facebook group, Music Therapy and
perfect.
Mindfulness. And so I urge you to check it out if you're interested in this at all, just to join the conversation with us. We want to have that community of how to discuss music and mindfulness together.
Well, hopefully after tonight you'll have a lot more people interested. I know that I'm a believer now. So again, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you again next Wednesday. Take care. Thank you for listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We hope you enjoyed today's program and discovered new ways to bring music, art, and dance into your home or workplace. Please find a copy of today's show at pbmti.com. If you have any questions for our guest or myself, please email me at Bree, that's B-R-E-E, at pbmti.com, or call the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute at 561-747-9944. Tune back in next week for an all-new live show. See you then!